When I was just a baby, I was taken away from loving adoptive parents into a nightmare designed by my biological mother and her husband. My name is Hannah McKinsey, and I was forced to live out my days in a small box and was starved until I was nothing more than skin and bones. When I was 8, I was finally rescued. I was alive, but just barely. People called me the girl in the box. That wasn't a nickname. That was my whole life. At a young age, I was adopted by a warm-hearted couple, Sabrina and Bill, but my biological mother wanted me back. She and her boyfriend took it to court. After a long fight, a judge ordered I be returned. I was around 2. From then on, the story stopped sounding like a custody dispute and started sounding like a horror movie. The place I was brought back to wasn't really a home. It was a trailer outside Dallas. There was my mother, Barbara, and the man I was told to call my stepdad, Kenneth. They didn't treat me like a kid. They treated me like a problem. My room was nothing more than a little box inside the trailer, full of trash and old food and worse. I had to sleep there on the floor. Sometimes I would get a pillow, sometimes a blanket, but only if I was good. I went to the bathroom in that same space because I wasn't allowed out to use anything else. I cried until I passed out because there wasn't anything else to do. They kept me there mostly all day and all night. I was starved on purpose. That was part of it. They would decide I didn't deserve to eat. Sometimes I'd get scraps, sometimes nothing. My stomach would swell from malnutrition. They told other people I had an eating disorder, and that's why you didn't see me. That was their cover story. There was physical abuse and there was sexual abuse. I'm not going to describe every detail here. You don't need every detail to understand. I will say this. I was not safe in my own body. I was beaten. I was cut. I was assaulted. I was used. I was told that if I screamed, they'd make it worse and then they'd laugh. That's how they kept control. When you're a kid in a situation like that, you split into 2 people. There's the you that it's happening to right now. And then there's the you that's trying to survive long enough to make it to later. I held on to later. I didn't know what it would look like, but I held it anyway. I would talk to myself quietly in the dark. I'd make up pretend stories. I'd hum. I'd count. I'd trace shapes in the grime. I'd imagine walking outside, down a street, just walking. The day it ended didn't feel like the day it was going to end. It started like the others. Then there were voices that didn't belong to us. Somebody brought law enforcement out to check. To this day, I don't exactly know who made the call. They found me in that box. You have to understand what they walked in on. Trash on the floor. Human waste. A starving 8-year-old girl who looked closer to 4, shaking, bloated from hunger, covered in filth. I weighed about 25 pounds. That's less than some toddlers. They took pictures. Those pictures went to court. I became evidence. I remember bright light. I remember being carried. I remember cold air hitting my face and how shocking that felt. I did not, in that moment, understand that I was being rescued. I just knew I was not in the dark box anymore. One of the officers later said it was worse than almost anything they had ever seen. A doctor later testified I was in such bad shape I needed surgery because of how badly I'd been assaulted. After that, things start moving fast. I was taken to a hospital. I had to be treated for extreme starvation. I had injuries. My mother, Barbara, and my stepfather, Kenneth, were arrested. They were charged with injury to a child, the strongest, clearest case the prosecutors could prove, without forcing me to sit in a courtroom and talk about abuse in front of them. They were both sentenced to life in prison. People ask if that made me feel better. Here's the truth. When you're a kid who's been abused that long, justice doesn't land like a movie ending. You carry what happened in your body. You carry it in your brain. You carry it in the way you flinch at sounds, the way you sleep, the way you eat, the way you trust. Freedom is real. Safety is real. But healing isn't automatic. It's work. I grew up. My story was on TV. People wanted to interview me. People wanted to tell my story for me. People wanted to make me a symbol of survival. I understand why, but I also want you to understand something else. Surviving and living are not the same thing. As an adult, I've talked about how I still have flashbacks. I've said on camera that I struggle with anxiety, with sleep, with depression. I've talked openly about hurting myself, about wanting to die, about how hard it is just to stay. I've said out loud that sometimes I still feel like that little girl in the dark, and sometimes I don't know how to quiet her. That's real. That's part of this story too. There's another part people don't know how to handle when they hear it, but it's honest. So I'm gonna say it. Hurt kids grow up into hurt adults. I tried to take the pain I knew and turn it into helping other victims. I got involved in survivor support spaces. I talked to other kids who had been abused. I tried to be somebody I wish I had back then. Someone who said, "You're not alone, but trauma doesn't turn off just because you're helping." A lot of people want a clean ending. They want bad parents punished, child grows up, child is okay. I wish I could hand you that ending with a bow. My ending is more honest than neat. Here's what I can give you. I am alive. That sounds small, but it isn't. There were so many nights in that box where staying alive was the only job I had. Staying alive meant maybe one day somebody would open the door. Somebody did. For years, I had no voice. I wasn't allowed to talk. If I screamed, I was hurt. Now I can say this happened to me and nobody can lock me up for saying it. My voice belongs to me. That matters. I can tell you what to look for. If something feels off, ask again. If the story doesn't add up, report it. If you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, you might save a life. And I can tell you what I tell myself, on the days I can stand to look in a mirror and on the days I can't. What happened to me was not my fault. So I'll say it now for me and for you if you need it. It was not my fault. People like to call me the girl in the box. I'm also the girl who had a loving, caring home, but had that taken away from me by adults who abused the law. I'm also the girl who withstood terrible torture for years, but clung onto a shred of hope that one day it would all come to an end. And I'm also the girl who, despite being hurt and broken, chose to speak up and raise my voice to help out others who might have gone through something similar. So yes, that terrible box was part of my story, but it's not the whole story anymore. If you or someone you know is going through a difficult time, share this story with them. It might just be the light they need to stay afloat. And if you want to share something similar with us, reach out. We're always here to listen. Subscribe for more survivor stories.